Planet Dolan. From teachers who lie about farting to condescending substitute teachers, the Planet Dolan crew reenacts some of the best true stories from our subreddit about the worst teachers ever. I'm Danger Dolan, and today I'll be your narrator. Number 10 was submitted by Ghostaey. The worst teacher Tolop ever had was in year 7. She'd find the smallest excuse, from dropping paper on the floor to sneezing, just to tell students off. So one lesson, while he was doing some silent reading, he was sent to the front desk because he was whispering to his friend about the diagram of a penis in a book. About 2 minutes passed and the class was completely quiet. His teacher then let out the loudest fart he has ever heard, and the whole class went into hysterics. Tolop then says, "Oh, that stinks," and the teacher gave him the death stare, only to reply, "Well, maybe you should have gone to the toilet before farting," essentially blaming Tolop for the fart. He then got mad at the teacher for embarrassing him, and he was given a 2-day detention at lunch for talking back to an adult. Number 9 was submitted by King Veteran. The worst teacher Pringle had was incredibly mean, and always screamed when they did the smallest things wrong. She made Pringle and his classmates do really hard projects, like making them memorize a 3-page script in 1 week, and then read out the script in front of the whole class. If they failed, the teacher would hit them on the head or in the stomach with a giant wooden ruler. If she didn't have a ruler, she would twist their ears until they turned red. She ended up getting fired because she twisted the ear of one of his classmates so hard that she ripped a little bit of skin under the ear until it bled. All this because he forgot his notebook. His notebook! Number 8 was submitted by Shadowthebro. In 3rd grade, Doopy had a teacher who hated her job and took her anger out in the class, and usually aimed her rage at the students. One day, she told them to read a book and write a 2-page report on it. The whole class all worked hard on the assignment, so when Doopy got a grade back, the teacher had given her 0% and said she never turned it in, even though she definitely did. The teacher then called in Doopy's parents for a meeting, told them that all she did in class was fool around and talk to other students. As she went to get a binder out of her desk, a small folder dropped out, and when her parents looked at it, they realized it was Doopy's folder, the same one that she had used to turn in her assignment. Her parents told the principal, the teacher got fired, and her grade was fixed. Serves you right, you bitch. Number 7 was submitted by CyberusFang. Emoji went to a Catholic school, and in 1st grade she had a teacher who she suspected might actually be a witch. She had brought a new pencil box filled with everything she needed for the year, and on the 2nd day the teacher took it and threw it out because she was using a coloured pencil on an assignment. The horror. A few days later, she made Emoji stand in the trash when she asked for a pencil from her friend Pandora. And get this, every year she actually dressed like a witch for Halloween. Coincidence? Nah, confirmed witch! Number 6 was submitted by grumpycat625. The worst teacher GhostToast ever had would be his reading teacher in 3rd grade. She wouldn't let him get up to go to the bathroom or even sharpen his pencil. She was a fast talker and sometimes he couldn't understand her. So one day he dared to ask her to repeat a question and she yelled, "I already told you what to do, so do it! I don't need to repeat myself, so get to work and stay quiet." So he said, but I need, and she cut him off by saying, "Go to the principal's office." Later that day, when it was time to go home, he accidentally left his book in the classroom. He went back to get it, and when he walked in, she just yelled, "Get your ass out of this room!" GhostToast grabbed his book and ran all the way home. Number 5 was submitted by bunniesanddeath. Sweet Commander was a military kid, so he was constantly moving schools. When he was around 5 or 6 years old, he went to a brand new school, and one day his head started itching. He scratched it, but the teacher saw him and forced him to stand in front of the entire class while she looked for lice. The other students called him Bug Bite for 3 months until he eventually moved to a new place. Number 4 was submitted by gamelinkreviews. Melissa was a really good student, but she had a substitute teacher who was super rude to even the kindest and hard-working students. One day she suspected Melissa was chewing gum, but clearly she wasn't. This teacher didn't care. She walked right over to her, leaned in close, and screamed, "Are you chewing gum in my classroom?" Melissa, of course, tried to deny the false accusation, but the teacher just wouldn't listen. Usually in this situation, ordinary teachers would give that student that attention. But this woman was not an ordinary teacher. No, she felt it was necessary to stick her finger inside Melissa's mouth and dig around for a full 30 uncomfortable seconds trying to find gum that wasn't even there. Melissa's parents called the school to complain, but the principal simply shrugged it off and said, "She had a right to search her if she suspected that the student had gum." Number 3 was submitted by Fishalini 786. Gooby also had a terrible substitute teacher. They were speaking about tongue twisters, and because Gooby doesn't speak, she couldn't say 7 silly sausages. She started to shout at her, saying she was just trying to annoy her and trying to be a rebel. The entire class was shouting at the teacher, saying, "Gooby doesn't talk." 1 month later, the teacher came back and got angry, calling one kid a manipulative little freak that fakes having diabetes so he can have fizzy drinks and other sweets in school. Surprisingly, she wasn't fired. Number 2 was submitted by Flower Mist 7432. One time, Slaptham and his brother were in the same class together. Not only are they brothers, but they have the same birthmark and can talk German. One day, they had a substitute teacher, and when he saw them, he immediately called them Dipshit 1 and Dipshit 2. They were only in the 5th grade at the time, and the teacher eventually got fired and was not allowed to step foot on the property. 1 year later, Slaptham found him working at a fries store at the counter. So what's the worst teacher I've ever had to deal with? Well, there was this one time where I was being just a giant cunt in class like usual. I was chewing the end of my pen, and unfortunately, this time it happened to explode in my mouth, and ink went all over the roof of my mouth, all over my tongue. It was unsalvageable. And so my friend next to me was like, dude, get some water, now! And so I stood up, and I went to walk out of the classroom. The teacher, at the last second before I got out, she said, Dolan, hold up. Where are you going? I turned to her, and I was like, And she was like, no, I haven't given you clearance to leave the class yet. Sit back down. So me, with my fucking mouth filled with ink, probably dying from poisoning, I sat my ass back down in the chair, and I stared at her, like, this is how I die? Because of this bitch? She won't let me leave the room to fucking wash my mouth out. So I sat there for, I think, about 5 minutes. At this point, I'm fucking worried now. I think I am going to die. I was like 9 or 10 at the time. This shit was real, alright? This is too much for me. And then eventually, once the teacher came closer, looked at me and kind of realized, oh shit, I better actually deal with this or I will be fired. She reluctantly said, okay, you've learnt your lesson now. You can leave the classroom and go wash your mouth out. And all I'm thinking in my head is, this bitch, right? This bitch, I'm gonna fucking hunt you down, right? After class, alright? I may cut your brakes. I can't even remember the teacher's name. Every time I think of her face, I just want to projectile vomit for a bit. Anyway, thanks everyone for submitting on the Planet Dolan subreddit with your stories. We have another question for you. What's your weirdest secret? Let us know on the Reddit page link below and you might be featured in a future countdown. That's it for this video, and have a good one!
Tried to ask out this girl at school when suddenly Hellbent came running down the hall and yelled,
"Dude, you have a massive erection! See? Look at your crotch!"
This led him to walk away, silently embarrassed with everyone, including the girl.